Assalamu alaikum. My name is Hassam Munir and I'm exploring and researching the topic of forced conversions to Islam in history for an upcoming article to be published by Yaqeen Institute for Islamic Research. I think this is a very important topic for us to think critically about simply because it's a cornerstone of this quote-unquote Islam was spread by the sword narrative that has been used for centuries by polemicists, by colonizers, and by some of the stalwarts of today's Islamophobia industry to demonize Islam and Muslims. However, even a cursory look at some of the commonly used examples of the spread by the sword narrative chips away and discredits it, and shows that while there were certainly cases of forced conversion to Islam in history, these were 1, rare, 2, exceptional, 3, in violation of well-known and clear Quranic teachings on the matter, and 4, often decontextualized or even miscontextualized when they are discussed. And to give you an example, I was recently reading a transcript of a talk given by Professor Hugh Kennedy at a conference at Yale University in 2008. Now, the topic of this conference, the theme of the conference was on the relationship between religion and violence. And Dr. Kennedy's talk was titled, "Was Islam Spread by the Sword? The Early Muslim Conquest Revisited." Kennedy convincingly argues that not only was forced conversion in these broad sweeping early conquests almost impossible, and he argues this using statistical estimates, reasonable, what can be reasonably estimated in terms of population sizes, in terms of the spread of the religion, those sort of things. But he also argues and he also gives examples of cases in which the Muslim leadership effectively discouraged conversion for a variety of reasons. So far from forcing the conquered populations in these incredible conquests, which swept through much of North Africa, through much of Central Asia, all across what we know today as the Middle East, into Spain, into India, etc. But there were so many different types of cases. There was so much variety in how different Muslim rulers approached the particular situation that they were dealing with. And when you look at those nuances, it really begins to chip away at this narrative of which simply states that people were forced to convert to Islam and that's the end of the story. Ultimately, Kennedy's position is the same as that of many modern historians, which is that we need to roll up our sleeves and start to separate myth from history in this Islam was spread by the sword narrative. All actual cases of forced conversion to Islam in history should be duly investigated, they should be condemned, and if possible, reasonable corrective action should be taken. That's the underlying message of this upcoming article as well, inshallah. And I hope you will find the article thought-provoking. It will summarize the arguments laid out by some of these present-day historians, and it will also look at 3 specific cases of actual forced conversion in Islamic history, but show that when we start to look in more detail at these cases, when we start to actually explore simply, rather than simply just going and saying that these fit what we already know about Muslims, whether you believe Muslims are terrorists, whether you believe Muslims are backwards, this and that, etc., etc. If it already fits into that narrative, that's very easy. But that's also intellectually dishonest. But if you start looking at some of the nuances of these particular situations in which forced conversion occurred, not to excuse ourselves or to sort of whitewash the history and say that these are insignificant cases, none of that, but simply to understand in their own context what was going on, I think that will definitely provide some food for thought with respect to how we engage with this narrative. So I encourage you to share your constructive feedback and any insight that will enhance our conversation about this topic. If you'd like to reach out to me directly, feel free to connect with me on Twitter. My handle is @HassamM_. Thank you. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.